and welcome back to our shared read of The Boy Who Grew Dragons by Andy Shepherd. Now, if you've not caught up yet, I'll post a link down in the description below to the very first part and to the previous part. But we start today at chapter 8. That's grim, that is. For the next hour, Grandad had me hard at work. I'd left my hoodie with the little dragon in the pocket on a pile of dry grass cuttings. He'd seemed happy enough to stay curled up since the excitement at breakfast, but I couldn't help casting glances at it and smiling at the thought of what lay inside. I can't say I was all that heroic about the digging we were doing, but every time I started moaning, Grandad popped a caramel toffee in my mouth. We were just loading another wheelbarrow with tangled brambles when someone grunted. We both turned and saw a grim-looking man in a faded blue dungarees wielding a hand fork like it was a lethal weapon. He was leaning across the wire fence that separated Grandad's garden from the one next door. "What do you think you're playing at?" he said, pointing at me. "To be fair, I'm not sure he'd say this was playing," Grandad chuckled. Too right. I had blisters on my blisters from all the digging. "I've had vandals in my garden, you know," the man said. "Caused all sorts of mess. Kids mucking about in those fields think they can go where they like, including my garden. No respect anymore. I won't be having it. I'll be watching. And I'll be taking matters into my own hands next time it happens." And he pointed a threatening finger at me as if I was the one to blame. "Well, this here's my grandson, and he's doing me a great favour by clearing the garden with me," Grandad said, still friendly but his voice firm. "He's a good lad. He won't need watching." The man glared at me, like he was waiting for me to show my true colours, and eventually growled, "You just keep away from what's mine, you hear?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Grandad popped a toffee in so I couldn't get the words out. Then the man pointed his fork past us towards the ugly heap of debris we'd piled up from our digging. There was lots and lots of bongleweed. "You'd better not let that lot near my garden. Blinking stuff. Once it takes a hold, you can never get rid of it. You won't get anything growing in there, not after that weed's dug its roots in." "Well, it's early days, but we'll get there," said Grandad, ignoring the old man's tone. He was like a chirpy robin cheerfully making its nest on a Rottweiler's head. "Blooming disgrace, this," the man said, waving in the general direction of Grandad's garden, and he turned away, mumbling something else under his breath. "Who is that?" I asked. "That's our new neighbour. Moved in a month or so ago. Name's Jim." "Grim, more like," I muttered. We watched him stomp off towards his shed, where he wrestled with the huge padlock. He slammed the door behind him, and for a second we saw his face at the window, glowering out at us. Then a piece of ragged curtain was roughly pulled across. "Poor fella," Grandad said. "Bet he just sat on a bumblebee." There's something that always amazes me about Grandad. He's brilliant at dealing with people. Even if someone is being horrible, he doesn't let it bother him. Not like it always bothers me. Instead of feeling cross or rude back, Grandad actually seems to stick up for them. "Poor blighter," he'll say. "Bet it was his birthday and everyone forgot." Me, I reckon some people are just like that. Rude, I mean. What was Grim's problem, pointing his bony finger at me, as if I'd gone near his stupid garden? I was pretty sure it wasn't vandals either, at least not the kind he was thinking of, because I'd seen something that Grim hadn't. There were dragon fruits littering the ground around the tree. They had burst open, leaving trails of messy pulp across the dirt. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 burst fruits. But did that really mean there were 6 tiny dragons hatched and on the loose? If so, then where were they now? As I walked home, I kept my hand in my pocket. I needed to feel the little dragon, just to check that this was all truly happening. Because everyone always says I have a great imagination, and it's true. I don't just daydream. I daydream in Technicolor with surround sound. So it could have all been wishful thinking, couldn't it? But as I walked, I felt my dragon's claws gently scraping my palm, and then I felt him curl up on my hand, coiling his tail around my wrist, and I knew this was no daydream. This was the real deal. I looked up at the clouds and imagined my dragon flying through the sky fully grown, soaring up into the blue, a jet of flame blazing from his mouth, me on his back. Inside my pocket, his hot breath warmed my skin, and with every puff the dream of flying flared brighter. But by the time I'd got home, I knew that dreams of flying would have to wait, because, let's face it, my dragon didn't even fill a shoebox. I wasn't going to get far on him. And as for jets of flame, the most he'd spluttered out was sparks, and that was mainly because he kept sneezing. He seemed to have a cold or be allergic to everything. As I climbed the stairs, the dragon popped his head out of my pocket and sneezed for the gazillionth time. Covering my hand with the end of my sleeve, I caught the glowing spark before it could singe the carpet. I was going to be an ace cricketer at this rate. I'd have the sharpest reflexes in the school. Safely in my room, I lifted him out and settled him on my desk. He hopped about inspecting things. I wondered what I was going to call him. Red? Scorch? Blaze? I tried them out, calling them to him. They were all good dragon names, but none of them quite fit this shimmering little creature. Obviously unimpressed by any of the names so far, he flew over to my cheese plant and started nibbling at the few remaining leaves. When he'd eaten his fill, he fluttered up to my shoulder, curled his tail around my neck. His scales glimmered turquoise, gold and back to ruby red, like a contented wave of colour flickering over his body. Flicker? I smiled and said the word aloud. The dragon tilted his head and looked at me. He uncurled himself, rose up into the air and sent out another spray of sparks in a glittering arc. And as he did, his scales flickered again, this time in the sunlight that shone through my bedroom window. I laughed, racing to snuff out each spark. Okay then, flicker it is. Chapter 9. Poo Patrol, Goldfish and Ninja Tortoises. Monday mornings involve a lot of running, arm waving, shrieking and crying. It's one of the days Mum works at the vet's and the only day Dad doesn't work from home, so getting me to school, Lolly to nursery and them to work can be a bit of a challenge. For them anyway. I usually just kick about in my room, avoiding all of the above until it's time for breakfast. But that was before Flicker. On my first school day since the baby dragon had arrived, I was more panicked than Mum and Dad combined. My first job was Poo Patrol. I'd already learned the best way to deal with Flicker's poos was with a pair of oven gloves and a water pistol, just in case any had dried out to the point of detonation. Then I used one of Lolly's little plastic spades from last year's holiday at the beach to shovel them up and drop them down the toilet. Quick wash of the spade in the sink and the worst job was done. The next thing was emptying out my toy box and lining it with some fresh paper and my old dressing gown. I was planning on leaving Flicker my cheese plant and a bowl of water. On that first night, I'd been so caught up in the whole "I have a dragon" hysteria, I'd forgotten he needed to drink. It was only when I'd gone to the loo and turned round to see him about to nosedive into the toilet that I figured that one out. Luckily, I caught him just in time. The last thing I wanted was him thinking that was the water bowl. By the time I left for school, I was pretty sure Flicker had everything he'd need to spend the day on his own in my room. But by the time I got to school, I had a nagging feeling I'd forgotten something. As I was racking my brains, Ted, Kat and Kai raced over. "Hey Thomas, did you know humans share 50% of their DNA with bananas?" Ted said. I didn't. And they're herbs too, you know. Humans. Bananas. They're herbs, not fruit. I hadn't known that either, but then I wasn't sure anyone other than Ted knew this stuff. His head was full of it. I've known Ted since we were goldfish. I mean, not actually goldfish, but the size of them. When our mums found out they were pregnant, they went to this class where you find out what to do with babies. I've no idea what they learned, but it had something to do with llamas, I think. That's where they met. And so that's when Ted and I first met. Although being squished inside our mums meant our first play dates were a bit limited. We were even due to arrive on the same day, which would have been pretty cool really, as we'd have the same birthday. But Ted went and barged his way out early, so he had a full 2 weeks with no best mate, which kind of serves him right. Kat and Kai we met on our first day at school. They're twins. Like me and Lolly, they genuinely seem to like each other. It doesn't stop them arguing, mind you, but if push comes to shove, if you mess with one, expect the other to come wading in for them. So there's the 4 of us, and it's been like that since forever. You okay, Thomas? Kat asked. Where'd you get all those scratches? I rubbed my arm. Until Flicker had got the hang of his tail, every time he batted it about, the arrowhead ended gouged into my skin. Tom, I said hurriedly. What about that? She asked, pointing at my hand. I fiddled with the plaster. It was just a mild burn from my first poo patrol before the oven glove. I'm rubbish at lying. I panic and then my overactive imagination gets involved. For some reason, right then, Nana's tortoise Jacko popped into my head. Only he was a ninja tortoise with a jetpack. I was just about to blurt out that I'd been attacked by a torpedo tortoise when luckily I was saved by Mr. Peters ringing the bell. I lunged for the door, just managing to get in front of Liam, I rule the universe, Sawston. Oi! He wailed. Sir! Thomas just elbowed me! I'd actually brushed his arm with the tip of my littlest finger, but Liam's not one to bother with details. Without hanging about to see if Sir was going to call me back, I ducked inside and made for the classroom. Well, I wonder if Flicker the Dragon is going to be at home alone and he's going to be alright. I wonder if he's going to get into any trouble or make any mess. Find out with me next time. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any instalments. Hope to see you soon. Bye!